Welcome to the Shower Epiphanies podcast, where we explore your hidden thoughts and desires, revealing your greatest drop the mic moments. Now, here's your host, Art Costello.
Welcome to the Shower Epiphanies podcast. Today, Tom Matzen is our guest, and I believe he's coming from British Vancouver, Columbia. And he is an international best-selling author of 2 books. Tom has shared his message to more than 100,000 entrepreneurs on 4 continents and in hundreds of TV, radio, and print podcast interviews. He now leads an emerging global enterprise with a mission to empower 10,000 authority entrepreneurs to build global movements and 7- and 8-figure businesses over the next 5 years. Welcome to the show, Tom. It is a pleasure to have you here. And could you start out by telling us your story?
Yeah, absolutely, Art. Thank you for the invitation. So glad to be here. It is rainy here in Vancouver, so it's nice to share some rain with you in Austin today. You don't get as much as we do. We're in the tropical rainforest up here, temperate rainforest, so we're used to this. So glad, though. Thank you for making time. Thanks for everyone for tuning in. My journey has been as an entrepreneur for 36 years now. 36 years, 82 businesses, made and lost millions along the way. 7 of them to 7, 8 figures and beyond. I like to say I've lost more money and learned more lessons in my business career than most people do in a lifetime. So hopefully we'll get into some of those today too, because those are all, I earned the stripes on those, Art. I earned the stripes on those.
That's great though, because what I really appreciate in that is that you mentioned that it was all a learning lesson, because that's what life is all about. It's about learning.
Totally.
So can't wait to hear some of the stories. We have a lot in common. I only owned 2 businesses my entire life, and I managed to lose millions and make millions also.
Well, as the more I did this, the more I realized that life as an entrepreneur is about how far you fall when you fall and how quickly you turn it around. I used to think it was about eliminating those ups and downs, just going straight line. And I realized, no, that's not the real world of being an entrepreneur. The real world is ups and downs. And, hopefully you get wiser, you get smarter, you listen more, you learn more, and the downs are shorter and the bounce backs are quicker. But probably 10 years ago when I embraced that concept of, it's part of the deal. Like, get used to it. It's part of the deal. And you know what? The journey since then has been so much more fun, because now it's a game to me. Then when the downs come, it's just a game. It's like, okay, great, let's go. And now I can, now a down could be 3 hours. A down could be 3 hours. And, that would normally have been like 3 weeks for me before. So I love it.
This is pretty early on in your story of how this all went about, but I think it's relevant. How much do you think learning to master your expectations really helped you rebound out of this? And when you learn, my big theory is that we have been expectant from day one. When we're born, we expect, and it's gone on from eons and eons of time. And once we learn how to expect, it changes the whole trajectory of our life. I learned it at 9 years old because I had a tough childhood and I had to learn everything on my own. So I had to learn how to rebound. And I did that by not living to the expectations of others, but living to my own expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And it changed the trajectory of my life. And that's what my research has been for years, is how expectations affect us. And for entrepreneurs, if they cannot learn to expect properly, it becomes very hard and it'll drive you down.
Yeah.
And I found in my business that was a big part of my being able to handle it all. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, very much. It's an awesome question and I love it. And I was thinking back as you were phrasing it, so when did that start to kick in? And I think it sort of came for me in waves. It wasn't one of those epiphany moment type things. I wish it would have been instantly learned, but I think it took waves. And the first wave, early on in my business career, I worked for Dale Carnegie Training. Mm-hmm. And I sold, and I was an instructor, and I was fortunate to mentor from some of the best trainers in North America at the time in that organization. And I learned that stretching your comfort zone was the key to happiness for me. Anyhow, I'm not sure that I would say that's the key to happiness for everyone, but I do know this to be true. If you stretch your comfort zone and you've got a support system around you when you're doing it, your life is filled with joy and passion, for sure. You may not accomplish the goals because that stretching your comfort zone isn't necessarily accomplishing goals, right? If you're going to bungee jump or something, that may or may not get you anywhere closer to your goal, but it's stretching your comfort zone for most people, for sure. As an entrepreneur, though, it was the same thing. I learned to stretch my comfort zone. And I remember distinctly what happened. I had moved from a small town in what you guys call the Midwest. It was the prairies for us in Canada. Your listeners will tell I am bilingual. I speak Canadian and American. We all have our gifts. And I moved to Calgary, and I was with Dale Carnegie. And in that job, I was selling, and it was 100% commission. Brand new city, big city compared to where I grew up. And my boss took me downtown, and he pointed up to the big skyline in Calgary. And it's got a big, beautiful skyline similar to parts of Dallas, Fort Worth. And he pointed up and said, "Okay, see those 4 towers?" I go, "Yeah." He says, "That's your market. Go." And that was the training program. I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Oh, yeah, you'll figure it out. Just go." And over the next 3 years, 70% of my income came from those 4 towers. I learned to cold call. I learned to stretch my comfort zone like crazy because cold calling, I don't think any sane person likes to cold call. I think you got to be a little insane to like cold calling because it's filled with rejection. And this particular set of towers had signs on all the doors, no soliciting, no soliciting. And I'm like, well, he said to go talk on every person. I'm like, well, no soliciting. So my young 23-year-old brain said, okay, I got it. I went in and and the opening line. And she goes, "Did you see the sign?" I go, "Yeah." I said, "Well, no soliciting." I said, "I'm not a solicitor. I'm not a lawyer. No, I'm here to help grow your business." And they would laugh or they'd kick me out, one of the two. But I learned to stretch my comfort zone, way beyond my ability. And there was one other part to it that I'll never forget. Back then, Lee Iacocca was the god of business. Right? You've earned your silver hair. You remember Lee Iacocca, right?
Oh, yes.
Turned Chrysler around, big rescue story, created the Mustang before that. An icon in the automotive industry. Well, it turns out that when he turned Chrysler around, the first thing he did was put the 100 top management through Dale Carnegie. And we had a letter. It was a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy that said, the best thing I ever did was put my 100 executives through Dale Carnegie. It saved Chrysler. Lee Iacocca. And I would walk into an office. I would cold call the CEO, the top dog. Here I'm 23 years old, right? Wet behind the ears, but super enthusiastic. And I'd walk in and I'd get 7 minutes because my boss taught me to ask for 7 minutes. I remember asking him one time, "Why 7?" He said, "Because no one asks for 7. Okay. So I had 7 minutes. And I would say, "I won't need all 7 minutes, sir. I promise. I've just got a couple of questions. And if I can't help you, I won't take up any more of your time. But if I can, we might talk a bit more. Is that fair enough?" "Yes, sir." "Okay, great. What do you think of Lee Iacocca?" "Oh, Lee Iacocca, he's awesome, blah, 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 blah." I'd say, "Yeah, I agree. Here's what he says about our product." And I put the letter out and they would read it. And I was in. And it was this crazy experience. Like, there's no way, and I should be talking to that level executive, but I learned to stretch my comfort zone. So that was the first wave of managing expectations, because what I realized was my expectations were entirely framed by how much I stretched my comfort zone. It was the first time I learned to make multiple thousands of dollars in 1 month. It was the first time I learned to make $10,000 in 1 month. It was the first time I learned to make $10,000 in one sale. Because when I got more confident and I understood what I was doing, I wouldn't sell the CEO. I would sell the CEO and his senior management team, because that's what Lee Iacocca did. He's like, "Well, why wouldn't you? You just told me he's brilliant. And so why wouldn't you do what he did? Come on, let's go." So that was the first real big shift in my ability to manage expectations. And then the second one came from a catastrophic failure of a business. I was still living in Calgary and everything collapsed around me and I lost everything I had. And I filed for bankruptcy for a $400 phone bill that was delinquent. Oh. And there were a bunch of others. Like, it was, to me, it was the entire world. Now the entire filing of that bankruptcy was like a bad week for me today. But then it was my whole world. Mm-hmm. And what I realized very quickly was that I am not my business. I am not my business. And I wouldn't say very quickly. It probably took me 3 months. of beating up on myself and what a fool you are and how could you do this and, pointing fingers. I had two other partners, but I was the one who got us all into it. So it was my fault. That's the way I took it. Mm-hmm. And I really blamed myself hard. And so it was a series of learnings for me. And now I actually think our game, whether we're entrepreneurs or not, our game is to figure out our highest and best calling and do it. And if it happens to be being an entrepreneur, then God bless you. Like, get in and do it. Let's go. Because the world needs, business people have messed up the planet. That's pretty clear. Business people are going to be the ones to fix it.
That's true.
They're the ones to fix it. Just about everything valuable in our life was created by an entrepreneur somewhere at some point.
Absolutely.
Right? Here we are having a conversation, thousands of miles apart, two different countries, completely, and we're just like talking like we're beside each other, right? Which is such an incredible technology. We take it for granted now. You're on Zoom, I'm on Zoom. It's like normal. In fact, if it's not like this, we are like, what's going on? That's how much things have changed, because some guy said, you know what? We should be able to talk to each other. And first it was the phone, and then it was video. And who knows, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, right? We might just jump into a teleport booth like the shows tell us we will.
Maybe.
And show up. And I'll come down to Austin. We'll have some great steaks. Wouldn't that be neat if you could have every person you interview on your podcast to literally teleport to your home studio? I think that'd be so cool.
It would be cool.
The need to have closure in any given situation is sheer human nature. And when it comes to romantic relationships, this desire skyrockets. Has your previously failed relationship left you in immense pain? It's not uncommon for people to shy away from a new relationship after their first one fails miserably. The fear of the unknown makes them hide in a shell to prevent any future heartbreak. Relatable? Despite wanting to love and be loved, you can't take the plunge if your mind and heart are still locked somewhere in the past. Maybe you aren't aware of the power of releasing the past, or perhaps you don't know how to do it. Art Costello in his online course teaches the art of moving on from bad places to happier, more stable ones. This course can change your life for good, helping you beat all kinds of negativity on the road to eternal bliss. Sign up now before the gloominess gets the better of you at expectationacademy.com.
I have a belief that, one of my mantras is I believe in the possibility of everything.
Ooh.
Everything becomes possible. So if you think that we can teleport into my office, then, I believe that in 10 years, we may be able to teleport to my office.
And now the big name speakers, the really big, the A-listers, they'll do a teleported talk. Have you seen this?
Mm-hmm.
Where they're broadcasting a virtual reality full version of them on a stage. I've only seen it on camera. I haven't seen it live yet, but it's about $60,000 an hour to do it. The cost, apparently. So it's not reachable for most people at this point. But, if you just apply Moore's Law, it'll be $1.50 in a couple of weeks, right? It's like, who knows, right? And if you can virtually do that, then we go to the next level where we're doing it. I think it'd be pretty cool.
I want to go back on something and bring up a little bit of my background because I was very interested in it when you said it. When I was 7 years old, do you remember the comic books that came out? There was all kinds of different comic books. And in the back of them, they had an ad that you could sell Christmas cards in July.
I remember the ads in the back of the comic books. I don't remember that ad. That's cool.
I asked my parents for a loan so I could order Christmas cards in July. And that's how I got my sales start. At 7 years old, I went door to door.
Oh, my word.
We were living in New Milford, New Jersey at the time, and I would go to all the big apartment complexes, and I would go door to door, knocking on all the doors and ask to buy Christmas cards in July.
My word.
I sold a ton.
I bet a cute 7-year-old knocking on the doors. How could they say no? Right?
Exactly. Well, listen, what happened? One day I knock on the door and a big burly man answers the door and he said, "What do you want?" And I said,
so a standard New Jersey greeting, in other words. Yeah, I'm with you.
Exactly. Anyway, he says to me, he says, "What do you want?" And I said, "I'm selling Christmas cards." And he said, "In July?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Do you want some?" He looked down at me and he said, "I'll take all you got." And I probably had like 4 or 5 boxes in my cart that I carried around, and he bought them all. And I started to walk away, and he said, "Hey, come back here." He said, "Do you know who I am?" And I said, "No, I haven't got a clue." Not in those words, but I said, "No, sir, I don't know who you are." And he said, "I'm the district manager for the Newark Star Ledger, which was the big newspaper that we had there." And he said, "How would you like a newspaper route?" And I said, "That's always what I've wanted." And he said, "You're 7, but we're not supposed to have 7-year-olds." He said, "But I'm going to give you, if you'll take this, you go home and talk to your mom and dad." He said, "I'm going to give you 10 customers." And he said, "I want to see what you can do." So I went home and talked to my mom and dad. They said, "Absolutely." 1 year later, I had 165 customers. I hired my older brother to help me to deliver the papers every day.
Oh, my word. That's awesome.
And I learned selling those Christmas cards in that newspaper group. I learned about rejection and how to handle it.
Yep.
And I'm wondering now that we've talked about this, that if my 9-year-old experience was not predicted by my abilities as a 9-year-old to handle the problems I had from my experience of selling those cards and papers and dealing with the rejection, because it realized that it didn't matter what anyone else thought of me, that I was in control of my destiny, and it has permeated my life. I'm 73 now. I mean, it has permeated my life all the way. I mean, no one
I actually think that's such a key thing that so many people have no appreciation for unless they've been through it. I mean, I actually think it should be mandatory that kids sell something. It doesn't have to be Christmas cards or paper routes. It could be, chocolates or whatever. For me, it was chocolate covered almonds for the local bowling teams. And that's where I got my first taste of massive rejection and success, right? Because if you hustled, you could succeed, especially as a kid, right? All you needed was enthusiasm, because enough people would buy just because you're a cute kid. It's like, "Oh yeah, give me some cards, come on," right? But you also got lots of rejection. And it's fascinating when I look today, and people are always slamming the generation, the next generation. "Oh, they're lazy, they're this." Every generation's done it, right? Our parents did it to our generation. Then it's the Gen Xers. Now it's the millennials and the Gen Y. And I mean, there's always this sort of labeling going on. But the one part that I think is actually true across the young generation now is kids aren't set up to go sell anywhere. Right? My son is 11, and he learned to play piano early on. He started at 3, and then he loved it. He got to be really good at it. And from the time he was 7, they call it busking in Canada, which I don't know if you know that term, but it basically means sitting on the corner playing music and getting some coins in your bucket. And except with music, it sounds nicer if it's busking. Sounds like a real career as opposed to panhandling, right? Well, he learned to busk, and he would, as a 9 and 10-year-old, he'd make $200 in a couple hours at a local market.
Wow.
I mean, literally 200. And he had been taught properly by his mom, not by me, Lord knows, to put, so much for long-term savings, so much for projects, so much for sharing, and so on. He had 5 buckets, and he only got to spend 20%. The other were buckets that were all set aside. Mm-hmm. And it was so inspiring, because he'd be like, Daddy, I made $40. I go, "What do you mean? You did a lot more." He said, "Well, no, that's my 20%. The other are my buckets." He didn't even count the other money as what he made. That's how good he was at savings and doing that, which God bless my wife. She taught him that well. But he learned rejection. He learned to communicate non-verbally, because when you're playing music, you can't talk to people. You're playing music, right? So he had to communicate non-verbally, and then he would talk to them in between. And it was such a great thing. And most kids nowadays, you shake their hand and it's like a wet fish. They don't even make eye contact.
Yeah, the other part interesting that I'm thinking about is we know of all these internet millionaires, these young kids that go out and they create these websites and these programs and funnels and do all this stuff. They don't even have human contact.
No. Yeah.
They don't even, they play a pure numbers game. They play, if I hit my target market and I have 9,000 people, 2% of them are going to buy, and, and all these other things. And they don't they don't experience what we experience going door to door and having somebody look you in the eye and say no, or the joy of having somebody look you in the eye and say, I'd love to buy your goods. You know?
Yeah. It's actually, if you think there's two skills that are the most important for kids, in my opinion, one is that learning to communicate your story, i.e. sell. I don't like using the word sell because the stereotypical sell is not what we're talking about.
No.
Right. But that's one. And then the other is just to learning to hustle. I was fortunate. I worked at McDonald's for my first job. I was 16 years old. And boy, if you survive McDonald's, you learn to hustle. You learn to clean as you go. You learn to smile. As Jim Rohn used to say, right? His numbers were like, you work at McDonald's, they pay you $3.15 an hour. You smile and whistle, $3.25. And he was always like, you don't need minimum wage raising. It's a ladder. It's a ladder. I would listen to these recordings of Jim, and I could hear him put my own voice in it. It's like, Tom, it's a ladder. You don't need minimum wage increases. It's a ladder. Smile and hustle. You get 10 cents more. And that they don't know that. They don't know that, right? It's interesting. I mean, if you do start a business when you're young, you learn that because you got to, right? The tech guys, as soon as they start to scale, then they got to raise capital. Then they got to recruit sponsors, or they got to do these. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, and they either learn it or they bring someone in to partner with them. So I think in some ways it corrects itself as they get going, but the technology-centric business is much tougher. I agree, for sure.
Yeah, it just, how the world changes and evolves. I mean, we're constantly evolving and that's why I think expectations are so important, because I actually believe that there's a genetic component to expectations, that we have a gene in this.
Oh, genetic component. What do you mean?
Well, I think that genetically we have a propensity to either have, this is the way that I phrase it. I believe that when we were created, whether you believe in God or whatever your beliefs are, we were implanted with a seed of expectation. I believe that that's the genetic component of it. And then we either look at things through the two lenses of expectations, either faith or fear. Faith not only being religious, but faith as a faith in a coach and a parent. But the greatest faith is faith in yourself, because God gave us that tool of expectation, and he wants us to be the most successful, the best version of ourselves that we can be, because he made us in his light.
I love that. I often hear that described as glass is half full, glass is half empty, but this is a much nicer way to describe it, right? Because the faith is the positive, seizing the future, seizing the destiny. I love that. And then fear, you're right. I mean, Tony Robbins, moving away, moving towards, moving away, moving towards. And fear is a big motivator for sure. And some people are just wired that way.
Yeah, but fear for the general population is a stop. It stops everything.
Yep.
The fear of failure, the fear of having to face somebody there's so many variations of fear, as many as there is faith.
Number one fear for entrepreneurs, I've done several dozen businesses. I've helped thousands of people start their own businesses over the years now. Number one fear for entrepreneurs is not fear of failure. You'll see if you can relate to this. It's fear of success.
Wow.
It's sabotaging their path when it starts to happen. It's like, I'm doing this and now I'm getting this. Oh, I'm going to stop doing that. It's insidious. It's sneaky. It's a bugger, and it catches people out and they go, well, what happened there? You were just crushing it. Oh yeah. Well, I had a bad partner, or had this happen, or this happened, or this happened, and fear of success sneaks up. And so I actually think we spend a lot of time with our clients talking about how to make sure fear of success doesn't get in your way.
Has anyone ever inspired you to discover a happier, healthier, and more fulfilled you? It is a magical experience, isn't it? Inspiration is indeed very powerful, yet it's often undermined. It can lift you from the ground to the sky in no time. Have you ever thought about returning the favor by inspiring the people around you? If you don't think you have it in you, we have good news for you. Art Costello's online course has everything you need to learn to supercharge yourself and shape your character into a powerful personality. Get ready to discover your strengths and unleash the creativity within. Don't believe it? Check it out yourself by signing up for this life-changing course at expectationacademy.com. That's expectationacademy.com.
You know what I have found out? That when you learn to handle your expectation, when you learn to manage your expectations, it breeds such a degree of self-confidence, and you cannot point a finger at anyone else. You can't say your partner did this, you did that. When you live to your own expectations and you own them and you learn to own them, you can't point it at anybody else.
Yeah.
And that is
I
one
like
thing that has dictated my life. You'll never hear me pointing to other people and blaming them, because my dad used to say, if you point your finger, you got three pointing right back at you. So,
Yeah.
But I think what I've learned with the power of expectation is that once you learn how to manage them, all of that fear like that goes away, because you start to build self-confidence and self-reliance. And, it's about self-care also. You begin to care for yourself more, and not in a selfish way, but in a way that is beneficial to all those people around you. And, you can change the culture of any business in this world by changing their expectations and having their staff and everything learn how to manage their expectations. Think of all the anxiety and stress. Where does it come from? Unmet expectations. I mean, a husband and wife argue because the wife doesn't like what the husband goes out and watches football on Sunday and drinks beer and all that kind of stuff, and then doesn't pay attention to her. Unmet expectation. She tells him, please, I want you to spend time with me. He continues to do what he does. Unmet expectation. He continues, Your kids don't do exactly what you want them to do. You get frustrated with them. The unmet expectations cause anxiety and stress. I actually believe that almost 90% of all anxiety and stress is related to unmet expectations.
I believe that. Yeah, I can totally see that. I can see that because it creates this loop, right? And especially if you're starting to blame yourself for that unmet expectation, right? Then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because now you're down on yourself. And, there's a good friend of mine lives in Austin, Alex Sharfin. Have you ever met Alex?
No, haven't met him.
He's I consider him to be like the next Michael Gerber, one of these leading thought leaders in the world of entrepreneurship. In fact, he actually has something he's created called the entrepreneur personality type, where he's literally studied the wild, wacky world of entrepreneurs for centuries and looked at the common characteristics. And one of them is that entrepreneurs thrive with momentum. No surprise, right? Mm-hmm. We love momentum. We love going forward. We also love getting pushed back, because we can overcome that. That's another form of momentum. What we don't love is being stuck. It's the worst possible thing for an entrepreneur is when you're stuck, right? And then what happens is your pressure and noise builds. And the pressure and noise builds inside your head, literally, right? Because you're blaming. You're like, wow, I can't believe I'm stuck. I can't believe I'm stuck. Or worse, I can't believe I'm stuck again. Well, Tom, you're such a loser, right? And the little dialogue of mind frick, Harv Eker calls it, starts to play around in these loops, right? And what happens? Well, guess what? Your pressure and noise goes up even higher, and now your expectations are not being met even more, right? So yeah, I think that's super profound. I think that actually, and when I think about my belief of the purpose of life, the meaning of life, is to find your highest and best calling and to live it. And in the finding of your highest and best calling is where that's so dangerous.
Very, very dangerous.
Right? Because there's not just our expectations, mom and dad, societals, spouses, right? I mean, there's, today people can pretty much do a lot more than they could 20 years ago or 50 years ago and still make a living if they want. Mm-hmm. But there still are societal expectations put on us all the time, right?
Yep. And I talk a lot about all the different types of, there's relationship expectations, there's societal, there's scholastic expectations, there's business expectations. One of the greatest expectations corporations have is meeting their financial expectations. And when they don't meet them, what happens? The stock market goes down, their stock goes down, and all those things happen. What people don't understand is that our expectations play such an important role in how we live our life. And
it's interesting because I'm looking at this phase of my business career, where we take thought leaders and authority entrepreneurs and we help them package their wisdom and knowledge and sell it through what we call high ticket programs. They're making $250,000, $500,000, $1 million a year, working 10, 15 hours a week. Like it's this sort of too good to be true combination, right? How can you make exponentially more money by working significantly less hours? And so a big part of our work is to identify these authorities and then show them the 60-hour work week idea is the wrong model. Like it's just the wrong model. If you want to truly have impact in the world, you can't be stressed out and working yourself down to the bone every time. That's not a good model. And that centers around, shifting their expectations on what a business is about, right? Is it possible to do good and make money, for example? That's one of our big tenets. We believe you can do good and make money at the same time. In fact, we actually believe you have a moral obligation to do good and make money at the same time. It's not just a principle of business. It's a fundamental core of how you should live your life.
See, that becomes a core business expectation. Yes.
And as a result, you attract people who go, okay, I'd like to do good and make money. And so they buy into it. And becomes a self-fulfilling positive prophecy in this case, because people are like, oh, you can do good and make money? Really? How's that possible? At some point we'll talk about it, but like we give away these scholarships now of our main high ticket program for entrepreneurs. And I just had a mastermind this morning where the leader's like, you're giving away what? I go, well, we're giving away $10 million worth of scholarships this year. I go, and there's a $10,000 program. Like it's a real program. I go, yeah. It's our most popular program. That's why we're doing it. He goes, that's like 1,000 people. I said, exactly. Good math. It's exactly 1,000 people. He goes, well, how can you possibly do that? Like, what's the business model for that? And I go, oh, the business model takes care of itself really, really well. But we're doing it because we want to change the world in this area. And it was this fascinating conversation because this guy has made hundreds of millions of dollars, the guy leading the mastermind. Super brilliant direct marketer, one of the top 5 guys in the planet in his field. But he was like, at first, he was just stuck in the concept. How could you possibly give away something that valuable and make money? And he understands the law of reciprocity. He uses it in his direct mail copywriting. He's done over 2 billion direct mail pieces, this guy. So he uses the law of reciprocity as a fundamental tenet of how he lives his life. And I actually said that to him because he still wasn't getting it. And I said, well, Brian, you remember how you volunteered, or you agreed to be interviewed for my summit last year? Yeah. What did you get out of doing that summit? What did I tell you were going to get, and what did you get? You told me I wasn't going to get much, and I didn't get much. I said, exactly. You were helping me. Did I pay you for that? No. Should I have paid you? No. Like, he got it. Like, he lives it, but he didn't see it applying in other areas. And I think that's part of the reason why podcasts and shows like you're doing are so important, because they'll challenge your belief systems. I think, anyhow, good ones will challenge your belief system to say, hey, have you considered this? Like, have you thought about, how expectations are serving you as an entrepreneur, or are they disempowering you? Right? Because I mean, based on what you're telling me, it could be either.
It can be either.
Right? Yeah.
That is the truth.
I love it.
Yeah. And if more businesses would set expectations instead of goals for their business. See, goals, people, if you don't attain them, there's nothing really happens if you don't reach your goal. You just go back and redraw the program and try to figure out how to get there. But when it comes to expectations, there's something about them that is so internal in human beings that if I tell you, golly, Tom, I'm really disappointed in you because you didn't meet my goals. Or if I say to you, Tom, I'm really disappointed because you failed to meet my expectations. It hits your core. It hits your core. But I don't want that's kind of something that I really don't like saying, because I believe that once you set your core expectations, and I'll tell you what my 3 are, and then you can tell me what your three are. Mine: integrity, love, and compassion.
Integrity,
love, and compassion.
Love and compassion.
Those are my 3.
They're your expectations?
My core expectations.
Core expectations. Mm-hmm. So translate integrity as a core expectation for me.
Don't know which direction you want your life to take? Are you sinking deep down into the pit of uncertainties day by day? So, what's the secret to leading a happy, satisfied life? It's taking matters into your own hands. But what if the matters in question are a total blur? Art Costello's Expectation Academy course aims to tell you exactly how you can get some clarity in your life. This course can be your savior on your journey to reinventing yourself. While you certainly can't plan your whole future ahead, you can definitely control twists and turns your life takes. So what are you waiting for? Sign up for this course now at expectationacademy.com. Get a chance to broaden your horizons and add meaning to your life. That's expectationacademy.com.
My integrity is non-negotiable. It is me. It is who I am. It is how I identify and how I live my life.
Love it.
I do that the same with love. I love people. I love to be around them. I love animals. I love just about anything that is out there. Flowers. I mean, I love flowers. And my compassion is for anybody who is willing to learn. I mean, my compassion, but those are all core things. They're non-negotiable and they are set in stone. If every business set up their core expectations for what, they have, mission statements and all these things. I believe in keeping things simple because the simpler it is, the better people can understand it and buy into it and believe in it. So if a corporation had 3 core expectations, this is what every employee in my company is going to see every day from me as the leader of this company. And when I had my company, my guys saw integrity, love, and compassion from me. I was very understanding about when things, how hard they were. I've done it all. I had actually built my business, starting out by myself for the first 5 years, and I knew everything about it. So I knew the difficulties. But if companies would just do that, like I said, there's something about goals that we just fluff it off. But when you start talking about expectations, it has a deeper meaning to it. And, there's a fine line between goals and expectations and all of the different results and all kinds of different things. So,
yeah, but if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying is this is a way to sort of define what I would call the rules of the game, right? The rules of the game of life that you're playing. Here are 3 set rules, right? You might change what you do. You might change where you do it. You might change how you do it, but you're not going to change those 3.
That's right. They are non-negotiable. And
love it.
Once you do that, it doesn't only affect your business, but it affects everything, every relationship that you have, your family, your friends, all of that. I've worked with people and just simply by identifying what their core expectations are, have seen them turn their lives and businesses around incredibly quickly because it's so simple. So
I love it.
Yeah, it's very interesting how they all work.
Love it. Do you teach this to people? You should, if you don't.
Yeah, I have a course, an online course that I do.
You should create a high-ticket program around it. You should actually get people immersed in it. Conversation for another day.
It is, Tom.
I'll get you a scholarship to our training on that because really the thing about courses that are challenging, and this is where rubber meets the road in the world of online training. Tony Robbins has 97% of people that buy his course don't complete it. 97%. And he's one of the top motivational trainers in the world. And his team, big, broad, well-financed, 97% don't complete.
Yeah, the actual statistic is 13%. Only 13% complete it.
Well, this is his data from his own students.
Yeah.
So mid 13 might be industry wide. I can tell you it's below 20. And here's my pet peeve about that and why I'm so into programs versus courses. If you went to a restaurant, we were talking about Austin before we started recording in the green room and my sushi place that I went there that I loved. Can you imagine going to a good restaurant and 87% of the time not getting a meal? 13% of the time you get a meal? Especially if you paid for it in advance. What would happen to the restaurateur, Art?
He'd be gone.
They'd lock him up. They would literally lock that person up for fraud. Like there's no way they would exist. And yet in the online marketing world, we're all like, oh yeah, that's normal. That's normal. You know what we call that? We call it the entrepreneur education cabal. Because there's an entire industry that just wants to sell you stuff, and that's the polite word for it, whether or not you use it. And I know you're not coming from that place because it's genuine, it's evident coming through with your compassion and love, plus with integrity, right? You don't want to sell something people aren't going to be able to use. And so what we've figured out the last few years is that you need to build skills, accountability, and mentorship to go with that course. And that's what we call a program. Mm-hmm. So you have checks and balances, you have support, you have accountability partners, success partners, you have a mastermind so that they can share and learn from each other and bounce ideas off of and have that community experience in the process. And then you can get my favorite example of this is Wendy Lipton Dibner. She lives in Connecticut. Her success rate is 93%. 93%. We're not there yet. We're on the way. That's our goal, is to get as good as Wendy. That's our expectations. To be as good as Wendy. She would be very happy if she heard that. But it's true. Because now, that's like crazy good results. We're on the way, but we have a long way to go before we're going to get there. But that's the game we're playing. The game we're playing, I was trying to think of what I would call that, and that's servant leadership as a core expectations. That's how I would define it. Because a servant leader is focused on you and your results rather than what they're getting from you as compensation, right? And the idea is if I focus on you and your results, I'll get compensated either by you or by others or by life or by karma, right? But if I focus on you and your results, that's the game that I should be playing as an entrepreneur, as a thought leader. So there's something for you to consider on your side. It also has an advantage, Art, of being far more lucrative. So you can have more impact. You make more money, so you can give back more to your causes that you care about, but you can also build a team to do all the stuff that you don't want to do so that you can be focused on the stuff you love to do. And I think that's one of the biggest things I've learned for people, anyone listening in, if you've got wisdom or knowledge or experience that can make a difference to other people, you got a moral obligation to reach them. Like, you should not keep your wisdom to yourself. If you're the best kept secret in your field, shame on you. Like, really, like, you've got an obligation. There's enough junk going on there in the world. Lord knows we see it every day, that the people that are doing good things, they need to get out there. They need to spread the word. They need to get out there and get people engaged. I think we actually have a moral obligation to do that. Does that make sense?
Oh, that makes perfect sense. And I'm glad you said it because, I think we've been at this now for about 35, 40 minutes. And I wanted to make sure that we learned, that my audience learned what you do and how you do it and what they can gain by it, And I think that was a very good.
Well, and thank you for that, because for me, I'm on a mission. My mission is to get 10,000 authority entrepreneurs to build 7- and 8-figure businesses. Not for what it'll do for them and their bottom line, which is a lot, but for what they will do with their tribes. My title is called Chief Movement Maker, because I've realized now I only want to play with one type of entrepreneur. It's the entrepreneur that wants to make a legacy impact in the world. They want to make a lasting impact in the world, and they're going to do it. And, in the world I play with, I help entrepreneurs do that. So they're typically around making the world a better place or saving money or better life or better relationships. So a measurable outcome is what we help them figure out. And a part of what we're doing this year as a company is we've decided, I mentioned it earlier in passing, but we've decided to literally give away 1,000 scholarships of our most popular program. So if anyone's listening in, if you're an entrepreneur or if you're a thought leader or if you're the best kept secret in your field, you're sick and tired of that, we'll get the links to Art so that it's on the page down below, and we will offer a scholarship. But right now, about 82% of the people applying are getting accepted. So not everyone will get in. They have to fit the criteria, but we're giving away an entire high-ticket program with 12 calls a month, actually, and training and material and accountability partners and templates so that you can create your own high-ticket, high-margin program, most importantly, that guarantees results for your clients. And you can change the world then. If you do that, one of those programs, we call it a game changer program. It's the Game Changer Program Academy that we're actually giving away. And an example, Art, like the work that you're doing, that's powerful stuff. So if we could find a way, and I'm positive with our system we could, of taking some of that work and packaging it up And you might need to focus on certain audiences. For example, applying all that wisdom to entrepreneurs would have an exponential impact on their bottom line, right?
Absolutely will.
So that work for entrepreneurs is a perfect high ticket program for you. Perfect high ticket program. And if you were to put that together and set that in place, it also has a couple of really cool advantages. When you said, okay, core, what was the word? Expectations, core expectations, right? The first thing I wrote down was fun, because it's a core expectation of everything I do. And it's also a superb business strategy. And the other one I wrote down was simple affluence. Simple affluence. I actually think that's the game entrepreneurs are playing in terms of scorecard. It's not about money. It's not about money. It's not about toys and trappings, but it is about affluence. It is about having a lifestyle where someone's doing some good work and they come to you and you say, sure, how much do you need? Great. I love it. Here you go. Go. Well, thank you. Just go have fun. Like, to be able to do that, Alex Sharfin's wife, Katie, who actually runs his business, she's the brains and the looks. Sorry, Alex. You know that to be true. She has a saying, see if you like this one, Art. The saddest thing in the world is a broke philanthropist.
That is great.
Right?
That is, I'm telling you.
Right? Because if you're a philanthropist and you got no money, that's sad, man. So part of our mission is, the other principle I wrote down was doing good and making money at the same time. I don't know if it's a core expectation, but it is a philosophy of ours that not only can you do that, you ought to do that. You ought to do good and make money at the same time. And it's why, for example, we're giving away scholarships to anyone that's listening in today. If you're still here, if you're still tuned into us, you obviously are getting something out of this conversation. If you've got knowledge, authority, wisdom, and you want to package it up, or you want to help packaging it up, apply for one of our scholarships. Come and join us on this journey. Entrepreneurs have wrecked the planet. I really believe that. And it's entrepreneurs that are going to fix the planet. It's not going to be governments. It's not going to be legislation, right? It's going to be entrepreneurs. And some will be faith-driven entrepreneurs and some will be non-faith-driven entrepreneurs, but it's going to be entrepreneurs. If you look at all the great impacts that are happening in the world where we go, wow, isn't that amazing? There's an entrepreneur behind that somewhere, right? And if you look at all the things we value, and I think, for those of us that have figured out how to package that for people, we have an obligation to reach as many as we can, which is why my partner and I decided to give away $10 million worth of scholarships this year. And it's why we're talking. We hired a podcast company and said, let us get out there. Let's get the word out. Let us talk to people and spread the word. And so I really appreciate the time. I know we're running up against the clock here. I don't want to get your technical editors in trouble.
It's not the editors that get in trouble. It's me.
Oh, that's right. They'll come back at you. Yeah, exactly.
No, but what I really loved about this is that you talked about some of the things that are really important to me, which is legacy and giving back. And all those, because, I've given far more away in my life than I've ever earned. I've just, I know it sounds crazy, but I've just always managed to help and give people. It's my heart. And I believe that one of your core expectations is service to others, service, so. Yeah,
I call that servant leadership, but yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And that, in fact, if you go back to your model of faith and fear, my experience is people that come from the faith point of view give quite freely because they know there's more. Mm-hmm. And if you're coming from the fear point of view, you're like, well, but if I give that to you, I may not get any more for me. I don't know. I got to kind of hang on to that. I describe that as, the fear people, their model of the world is there's an apple pie and there's only so many slices. And the faith people, we got a pie making machine. Let's just make some more pies.
And it makes such a difference in the world. I just read over the weekend, Michael Dell and the Dell Foundation, his wife, gave $100 million to the University of Texas to help students with housing and books and tuition.
What?
Yeah, that Michael Dell gave $100 million to the University of Texas so more students can not have as much debt when they get out.
I love that.
That's a servant's heart right there.
Totally. And the good news for anyone tuning in is the way the tax laws are set up, you're going to spend that money one way or the other. right? So why give it to DC or your state legislators? Why not give it to people like, things you care about that you can control? I love that idea.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the people say, well, rich people have an obligation to do that. And I go, well, yeah, but we all have an obligation to do that. It's not just rich people. In fact, I firmly believe that if you do it from the beginning, you get rich, right? And not just financially, but emotionally, spiritually. I mean, look at your list, right? Integrity, love, compassion. I don't see cash flow on there, right? Right. And yet without cash flow, you can't put those into practice, right? So you have a business strategy that can serve your higher calling. I love that. I think that's the way it is. And I actually think there are there's actually a book that was written in 93 called The Strategy of a Dolphin. You ever seen that one, Art?
Haven't seen that one.
You can't get the physical copy of it anymore, just ebooks. The Strategy of a Dolphin. And it says basically there's 3 types of people: sharks, dolphins, and carp. See if you recognize this. The sharks are the kill or be killed. It's all about them. You recognize a few of those people, right? The carp are the people that every time you talk to them, they're getting eaten by another shark. It's like, well, didn't you get eaten last week? Yeah. Oh, yeah, it was terrible. Blah, blah, blah. I go, why are you getting eaten this week again? Oh, my gosh. Like every time you talk to them, another shark is eating them. And then there's the dolphins. The dolphins are the team players. It's all about the pod. It's all about fun and play. But in the wild, I don't know if you know this or not, the only creature the shark fears is dolphin. The shark doesn't fear man because it doesn't know us. We're not part of its element, but it fears dolphins. And the reason is if a shark goes after a weak dolphin in the pod, all the rest of the dolphins gang up on the shark and beat it senseless until it can't swim. And when it can't swim, what happens to a shark? Game over. Shark bait. Right? Because sharks have to keep moving so the gills are oxygenated or they die. And so sharks don't mess with dolphins. And I love that metaphor. I love that metaphor because the dolphins are the ones that I want to play with. They're the dolphins they're the ones that care about legacy. It's not just about trappings and stuff, right? It's about legacy and impact. And I mean, what an amazing thing to give for, right? Lowering tuition so people graduate with less student debt. Like that's a heart thing. That's not a head thing. A head thing, he'd donate computer labs or a building or Texas sponsor the damn football team, right? If he was trying to be businessy about it, but clearly that's a heart thing. I love that. That's a great story. Thank you for letting me know.
Yeah. And I mean, he's not the only one that does it. I mean, Bill Gates their foundation does a lot of great work. There's a lot of people out there that are doing great work.
Well, and now they're challenging each other to do more and more great work, which is something I love. Yeah. I love to see that because, money is just a tool for doing good for others, right? It's a measuring stick of the value you bring to the world, right? How much you bring in based on how much value you provide. But then once you've got it, it's a tool to do good. It's just a tool. Absolutely. It's a tool just like your time. I mean, we're having a chat. We're going to affect some people's lives. Is it going to be 5 people or 500 people? Who knows? But we're just giving. We're sharing, and some people are going to listen in, and we're going to make some lives better. I love it. It's a very cool journey.
That's what it's about.
Absolutely. Well, this is fantastic. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you, Art.
I wanted to give the audience your information. I'm going to include it in the show notes, but I wanted to get I see you're putting it up on the screen.
Yeah, the best way to reach me, especially if you're interested, our nonprofit is called Entrepreneur Empowerment Institute. So the URL is entrepreneuремpowerment.org. And then if you go /scholarship, you go to a hidden page where we explain the program and show what it takes to apply. It takes about 7 minutes to watch the video. And then it takes about 10 minutes to fill out the forms. If someone's interested, anyone tuning in, as long as that page is active, that means we haven't given away our 1,000 scholarships still. And, at this point, we're loving it so much, we might do another 1,000 after this because it's just such a cool model. I love it. And it's so fascinating to see people that are experts in this field, Art, their reaction when they say, you're giving away your most popular program? Are you nuts? Like, it's just fascinating to see how their brain melts down. And then, by the way, in doing so, it's been economically rewarding to us way more than we thought it would be. Way more than we thought it would be. We knew it would be good for business because people would fall in love with it, get lots of results, make some money. They'd want to refer us people and do other things with us. We knew that. Mm-hmm. But way more than we ever imagined. way more. So it's a very cool strategy. And that's also something, if you're tuning in and you've got wisdom and knowledge, you need to get it out there. You need to get out there, whether you sell it or give it away, but get it out there in the world. It doesn't do any good if it's sitting inside your brain, right? I mean, 98% of business people say they have a book inside themselves. Yeah, well, guess what? Here's a hint. Get it out.
Anything that's inside your head and stays there is merely a thought.
Yeah. And if you're my age or your age, it's a thought that's decaying and those brain cells are dying at a rapid pace. So you better get it out before those particular brain cells die. And you go, what was that idea again? What was that? Core expectations? Yeah, that was it. Right? We got to do that. And that's not just people our age. That's people at any age, right? Wisdom is wisdom.
Yep.
Wisdom is wisdom. I actually think it's not about wisdom. It's about perspective. What's perspective to me? It's the knowledge to know what to do and the wisdom to know what to do in what order. That's perspective. And that's what people, to me, are paying for. They're paying for your perspective, right? What to do, all the steps, but you can Google anything today and get 100,000, 1 million pages on any topic you want. It's crazy, right? So the knowledge alone isn't going to get you anywhere. You also need to be able to sort it out and say, well, in this order, you need to do this, and then in this, and then you do this, and then you do this, right? So
this has been awesome. I'm sorry we're going to have to wrap up, but I want to say this before we do. Wait for part 2 of this interview. There's going to be a part 2.
Love it. Well, we'll see if Art applies for the scholarship and he puts this into practice so we can impact more people. I love this. This is really powerful. It would be a fun strategy session to talk about how we could apply this. So the offer stands there. Definitely reach out if you want to talk, Art, on that separately. And thank you, everyone listening in. I know podcast world, it could be one person right now or it could be 1,000. Whatever it is, you're working to make your lives better and you're going to make other people better. So good for you. Way to go.
Tom, it's been a pleasure. And I really want to thank you. And audience, as you know, everything will be in the show notes and we'll have it all there so you can get a hold of Tom and get a hold of the scholarships that he's offering. I'm going to encourage you on it. And don't keep it inside you. Become a doer. Make it happen. Heather White, go ahead and take us out of here. And everybody knows where they can get a hold of me. Art at Expectation Therapy, websites, expectationtherapy.com. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. See you next week.
Thanks for listening to the show. Drop us your comments and questions with what you want answered on the show. You can subscribe on iTunes and Binge Network. You can also get more information on the website, expectationtherapy.com.